Hello, my name is Morgan Gray, and welcome back to the Afrocentric Podcast.
I wish I was in Dixie, hooray, hooray. In Dixieland I took my stand to live and die in Dixie. Away, away, away down south in Dixie. Away, away, away down south in Dixie. And I wish I was in Dixie, hooray, hooray. In Dixieland I took my stand to live and die in Dixie. Away, away, away down south in Dixie. Away, away, away down south in Dixie.
We don't funk with racism. We don't funk with people who don't support the LGBTQ plus community. And baby, we damn sure don't funk with anybody who don't love a beautiful black queen, baby. You see this tape?
You don't let nobody act black and then go home and be white.
It only takes a little bit of white brainwash to activate the coon chip in the average Negro.
And a lot of white folk have demonstrated eloquently that they don't have no sense.
And we are back with the Afrocentric Podcast. And we're back with our Black History Month special, Black History with Black historians and scholars. And here with me today, I have the incomparable, the educator, the parlay, Miss Bria Young. How are you doing today, Bria?
Hi, Morgan. Thank you for having me back.
Yes, Bria. For those who do not know, me and Bria did an episode earlier, and it is called Keeping Up with the Caucasians. Very exciting episode. So if you want to go back and listen to it, tune in. But I'm happy to have you here for this special as well.
I'm so happy to be back and talk about the civil rights movement.
I think that this episode is going to be so special because what we're going to do on this episode is do the inverse of what they're expecting. So this episode is dedicated to the civil rights movement and the whiteness thereof, and we're going to be talking about how whiteness played a part in the civil rights movement, and we're going to be looking at the offense instead of the defense. So I'm interested. We're going to learn about a lot of hate, crimes, and violence today. This is what we're going to talk about.
Yes, always.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead and jump into the first question. So the first question is, what is the civil rights movement, and what white supremacy groups were created to counteract the movement?
So, and I've thought about this for a long time, and I want to take it back, and I know you may have issue with this, but I want to take it back to Du Bois's 1899, the Philadelphia Negro.
You do it, because that's where we ended on the last episode, so you hop in where you got to.
Okay, good. Because for those who don't know, when Du Bois was commissioned to write the Philadelphia Negro, to do this statistical research because white people love data, it was the University of Pennsylvania said, we need to figure out why we have a Negro problem in America. Du Bois said, okay, I can do that. So he does, I forget how many months it was. I think it was like 15 months in Philadelphia, doing all the hard statistical work, out in the community, talking to people, trying to figure out genuinely what the hell's wrong with the Negroes here.
This is where? This is in Chicago, correct?
Philadelphia.
Okay, so he's within this community. He's going door to door. He's knocking on everybody's door. He's like, what's up, niggas? They said we got a problem, so I'm here to find a solution to the problem. Yeah. So what is the problem, and what was Du Bois' solution?
So the problem was not the Negro.
It won.
No, of course it wasn't. It was American racism.
Girl, you could have fooled me.
Which... they learned their lesson, and that's what, so a real quick version, because I don't want to take a lot of time, I definitely recommend reading the Philadelphia Negro, because he doesn't just say that it's American racism. He obviously, Du Bois has his own contention within the Black community, and he is not perfect. As a scholar, as a man, he's not perfect. We get that. But the fact that he can do this statistical work, he's very prolific as an intellectual. The white people trust him, more or less. But he is not shy about saying, like, you should feel shame, America, in having me do this study when you won't leave Black people alone long enough to actually prove that they're worth a damn. But like I said, he does sort of indict the Black community a little bit. The Black church, he says, we need to do more for our community.
And they do, and they stop. They really did.
But I think it was around, it was during, like, right before the Civil Rights Movement. They have the same question. Why do we have a Negro problem in America? So it's the Carnegie Mellon Foundation, I think, is the one that wanted the study done again. And of course, why not ask Du Bois? But then they said, oh no, Du Bois is going to be biased. He did this. He already found out it's American racism. That's not what we want to hear. So they have someone from Sweden come and do this, basically the same study.
So what the Swedish meatball said was the solution. What was the problem?
American racism.
No. Girl,
Yeah.
shoot me in the leg and call me a dog. You lied.
It was American racism, just like that. He says, you know what? You have a moral problem in this country because you have this aspirational document that says all these beautiful things about freedom, but then you hate Black people and treat them like they're garbage. Of course there's a problem. It's with you.
So now that we have an understanding that when we're asking how does it feel to be the problem, and the answer is we're not the problem. American racism and institutionalized systemic racism is the problem. So where do we go from there?
So the civil rights movement, in terms of like a definitive time period, it really started, I think most scholars would say, when Plessy v. Ferguson was overturned.
You have to tell people what Plessy versus Ferguson is.
So Plessy basically stated that we could have separate but equal lives.
Okay.
It put it into law and said that this is what we're going to do, and it's going to be okay because it'll just work out. Understanding that it didn't. We all know that it didn't. So Plessy demonstrated via train that that's not what's actually going on here. Like, you're going to make me go and sit in this god-awful train and say that it's fine. But separate but equal was never worked out in the way that they thought it would. And what's more is that the overturning of that, Brown v. Board, they documented psychological consequences by having this doctrine of separate but equal that didn't exist in the way that they thought about it.
So when you say psychological differences, so you're telling me that there was trauma because of it. Can you go more in depth into it?
So it's, footnote 11 in the write-up of the Supreme Court case, which was done, which we know it as the Dahl test.
For this one, we're going to dive into an often forgotten piece of history known as the Dahl test. Many people have little memory or knowledge surrounding the psychological test known as the Dahl test, and really I had forgotten about it until I recently watched a segment on it. In the 1940s, psychologist Kenneth Clark and his wife Mamie Clark designed and conducted a series of experiments known colloquially as the Dahl test to test the psychological effects of segregation on Black children. Although Dr. Kenneth Clark was most famous for the Dahl test, his personal achievements were equally as prestigious. He was the first African American to earn a PhD in psychology at Columbia, to hold a permanent professorship at the City College of New York, to join the New York State Board of Regents, and to serve as president of the American Psychological Association. His wife Mamie, she was no slouch either. She was the first African American woman and the second African American after Kenneth, her husband, to receive a doctorate in psychology at Columbia. The test itself, it was fairly simple. The Clarks used 4 dolls that were wearing diapers, and they were identical in every way that is, except their color. They then showed these dolls to Black children between the ages of 3 and 7, and they asked which they preferred, which were nice, which were pretty, versus which were bad and which were ugly, and a majority of these kids, they attributed the positive characteristics to the white dolls and the negative characteristics to the Black dolls. Just imagine it. A Black child sits at a table with 2 dolls that have brown skin and black hair and 2 dolls that have white skin and yellow hair, and the child gets asked a series of questions like, give me the doll that you would like to play with. Give me the doll that is a nice doll. Give me the doll that looks bad. 253 children's responses were recorded. The experiment ends and the results are tallied. 67% indicated that they would prefer to play with the white doll, 59% indicated that the white doll looked nice, and 17% said the white doll looked bad. And that's in contrast to the 59% that indicated that the Black doll looked bad. And remember, all of the children studied were Black. It was reported that there was a question that said, "Give me the doll that looks like you," and a couple of the children broke down and cried, and a few stormed out of the room. One can say that the doll test was arguably one of the most socially important scientific experiments because of its role in the civil rights movement, making the case against segregation. As it was the findings from this test and the testimonies from the clerks that the NAACP Legal Defense and Educational Fund used the basis for Brown versus Board of Education to support the argument that segregation harmed Black kids. In fact, the judges did rule that racial segregation in schools was unconstitutional, leading to the integration of public schools. I will say that the doll test did not go without its criticisms, as it seemed to provide minimal measures to remove biases or external influences. But regardless of all of that, it did play a pivotal role in our history.
So a Black researcher and his wife, and now the name escapes me right now, but they performed essentially the doll test to figure out if there's any like psychological trauma from existing in a space where we can say separate but equal, which is also why Brown v. Board has the highlight, even though it's of multiple states, in Topeka, Kansas, because Kansas was as close to separate but equal as
it was gonna get.
Yes. And they said, even despite that, even despite having the resources, Black people having the resources that white people do, Black children are internalizing that there's something different about them, that there's something less than about them, and it's affecting their whole lives. It's changing the trajectory of their adulthood. So once again, you cannot tell me that there's a problem with Black people when the system is trying in front of our face saying that it's equal and then stabbing us in the back. So that's the importance of Brown v. Board and overturning the separate but equal doctrine, where it really started the beginning of the civil rights movement. And it's so nuanced the way that this works out, because, and I would be ashamed if I didn't bring this up, but one of the things that America has done very well, and it's coming out of Eurocentric thought, has to do with legality. Explain. So the fact that the Nazis, which Isabel Wilkerson talks about in her book, Caste, the Nazis came over to the United States, right?
To study American racism to be able to bring it back to Germany.
So, and the fact that this happened, the fact that this happened and people don't know about it. They do more now because of Isabel Wilkerson's work, but the Nazis were in awe, not that we discriminated, because people discriminate.
Everywhere. Socially. Social racism.
What they were so interested in was the fact that we legalized our discrimination. And they were like, how'd you do it? So they sent a brain trust of Nazis to the United States to figure this out so that they could replicate it in their own country.
What cities were they located in? Were they in American South? Tell me they were in American South.
They probably were all over, because this just it doesn't matter if you're in the South or the North. You're going to figure out how to do legal discrimination. Yeah.
So I think it's interesting that you bring that up, because I just learned that during the scramble for Africa and they colonized Africa, that's the same thing that a lot of colonized African countries did, especially during apartheid, is they sent people over to the American South to be able to learn what they did to be able to discriminate and oppress the people so they can take it back. Craziness.
But common.
So when we are talking about, can you explain a little bit more about the scramble for Africa and how it mimics American oppression?
Yeah, I can. So, and I want people to really hear this in terms of the engulfment of the African continent, and I forget who said this, was nothing if not legal. So as you were talking about, you have all these countries scrambling to get a piece of the pie of Africa, which is what we know. And what ended up happening is you have Europeans coming into different territories, redrawing lines, saying that this land, because of this law, is now under our control. And you use all this legal jargon to really confuse what's going on.
As well as to justify the bullshit you're trying to pursue.
Yeah, which is it's a common thing that has happened all over the world. But like I said, in terms of like how we get to the civil rights movement, and so much of the civil rights movement it's a resistance movement, because while understanding that we as Black people need our own laws as well, to understand like we're not going to make any kind of change unless we can directly change the social institution that is our government.
And that is definitely seen with like the Black Panther Party and their, what is it, the 12 rules that they have.
Oh yeah.
Because that's something that we will talk about when we get towards the end of the podcast, about how they definitely push for our own set of laws to be judged by their own set of colleagues. So like that is definitely something I think we need to bring back, because nobody's going to understand our experience more than we are.
Yeah. And so that's the thing, because there was such a push during the civil rights movement, like I said, to really say like, we got these Reconstruction amendments, the 13th, 14th, and 15th, but somehow you've managed to not actually implicate any of that. You're saying, oh, it's in the law books, but we're not enacting it out. We're still fighting for our basic rights because for some reason they're just not being utilized in the way that they should be. And like, as we've talked about in numerous circles, and I'm sure people understand this, the 13th Amendment, which was the one to abolish slavery, is written into it that slavery can persist under certain conditions. And that's the workaround. Like, to have clever people, I mean, that's a good legal scholar in American terms. If you can say, on one hand, that slavery is abolished, and on the other hand, have these little like loopholes and like backdoor deals to make sure that it persists.
Let's give a few examples of how slavery still exists in America, because you can see institutionalized slavery through the prison system. Yes, I feel like you can see slavery through football and different types of sports. Can you give another example?
So, I mean, we've seen it
financial slavery.
There's financial, so anything having to do with work, like different work laws. And during the civil rights movement, that's when we got the equal opportunity with workforce that's has different workarounds. Like, if you study law, one of the things that makes you a good lawyer is understanding how to do the workarounds. Like, that's all it is. So you have the equal opportunity from employers, and then also with voting, which has always been like this really contentious thing. Like, why is it so hard for Black people to go out and vote? All these, well, not all these years later, but these many years later, we're still having the same conversation. We're still out here asking what the Negro problem is. Question's been answered multiple times, but why are we still talking about it?
Lord have mercy. So you got to tell the people, what is the civil rights movement?
Oh, sorry. So the civil rights movement, basically, I'm sorry, because it's so nuanced, and I think it's hard to answer too, because the civil rights movement has always existed.
Yeah.
As soon as they said, we're taking African and making them part of an enslaved class, best believe we've been fighting the whole time.
So you could argue that the civil rights movement has never ended.
Mm-mm. It's always been in existence. It's never ended. But for the purpose of this, we're going to say it's from Brown v. Board, so 1954-ish, to I want to say 1970s. But that's like an academic, like putting bookends on it. But my opinion is that we're still right in it.
Powerful. What are some examples of cases that were created in opposition to the progress of the civil rights movement?
So I'm going to ask you once again to expand on that question so I can really hit them where it hurts.
Okay. You put your boxing gloves on. You're going to be a fighter for Jesus today. All right, so when we're looking at the formation of the civil rights movement, you see the creation of different types of organizations that make up, and they are actually doing the work to progress the civil rights movement. But you have to understand that in opposition of that, there were also the creation of groups and different types of ideologies and thoughts that were created to work against the progress of the Civil Rights Party, right? So you have the reincarnation of the second wave of the Ku Klux Klan during this period, and you see that like the way that they go about their racism and hate has opened up, it's extended more to be able to allow more hatred for more groups of people, not just African Americans, as well as the acceptance of women and children within their clan as well. Or you will see the creation of the white knights coming up and coming forth. That's another hate group that's full of white people. Or you can see different types of media being portrayed during this time period to still uphold like racist ideologies as well as to oppress Black people while they're trying to progress forward.
So you just made me think of something while you're giving this litany of terribleness.
Thank you.
So, and again, I'm going to take it back just a little bit to World War II. We were talking about the Nazis and the fact that the Nazis were in awe of us. Actually, the Nazis thought we were doing too much with our racism.
No.
At one point, they were like, "Ooh,
y'all running out.
You guys are going hard." Like everyone, every Black person. But so one of the best things, and this is terrible to say, but this is just the reality. One of the best things that has happened to Black people in terms of our country's history is the World Wars, because they got to leave America.
And they got an opportunity to make more money and send it back. And then it created different opportunities. I'm sorry. I just want to say that, like, especially during, like, World War II, Black women were actually given the luxury for the first time to be able to stay at home and not work.
Goodness. Yeah.
And it is so sweet. And, like, it pissed white women off. Because it's so funny to think about, because they have been, like, 400 years deep. Black women in the house cleaning their ass, cooking them meals, rearing them kids, tucking them in, and then they said, "Y'all free, no more." And then these niggas went off to the war. They fighting for the war. They sending money back. Black women at home. They shopping. They cooking collard greens, putting their feet in it. And white women start passing bills. They like, "Bring them bitches back. We need them. They gotta work. We can't do nothing here." But sorry.
Yes, that's a whole, like, if you look at the parallel with feminism, the waves of feminism, and Bell Hooks saying, like, why are you fighting about getting jobs? We've been working.
It's because they got this whole slew of work put on them, and they did not prepare for it.
Yep. Exactly. But to get back to your question, we could talk about this all day, and I know we got to keep it moving. But with World War II, what I was going to say, and I think what you brought up is excellent, this idea of having capital and being able to send it back home. But even at base, the fact that Black men got to go overseas and not be treated as less than human by other people, this is so important. And I feel like we don't talk about this enough.
Like the double V campaign.
Well,
the double V campaign.
Yeah, tell me about that.
Okay, so double V campaign is victory at home, victory abroad.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
Like many Black people felt like it was unjust that they could fight for the rights of the country, but the country would not provide equal rights for them.
Yeah, no, exactly. So they learn this really valuable lesson in tandem with going overseas and having, like I said, having foreigners treat them like the French treat them, like they have humanity. And that changes the whole scope of everything when they get back.
So you may have heard of the Freedom Rides of 1961, part of the Civil Rights Movement, but have you heard about the reverse Freedom Rides of 1962? White segregationists in Arkansas, Mississippi, and Louisiana began targeting African American welfare recipients, single mothers, and formerly incarcerated individuals for what they called reverse Freedom Rides, sending families on one-way bus rides to various northern cities with promises of housing and jobs. And of course, there were no housing and job opportunities. In Little Rock, Amos Guthridge, president of the Capital Citizens Council, an organization that was founded in 1956 to resist desegregation, began promoting the idea of the reverse Freedom Rides and sending African American families north. The idea was simple. They wanted large numbers of African American families to show up on northern doorsteps. Northerners would not be able to accommodate them, and they would not want the influx of people, therefore their hypocrisy would be exposed. The primary targets were people who they deemed a burden on public resources. That included single mothers with many children, welfare recipients, and recently incarcerated individuals. In New Orleans specifically, they had posters up in the prisons that were targeted towards Black inmates nearing the end of their sentence. In total, they ended up sending approximately 200 to 300 people to northern cities such as in Massachusetts, near the summer home of the Kennedy family. Almost 100 of these reverse freedom riders were boarded in Little Rock.
So to say more about the gift that was World War II is, and you were talking a little bit about shame before we started talking on the air, but
bring back finger pointing. Bring back blame and guilt.
Yes, please, because after World War II, when everyone was like, Hitler, I can't believe that happened.
It should have been a nigga in the crowd like, that's shame on your family.
Yeah, and you have all these Black people coming back and saying like, oh my goodness, was Hitler the only person who was terrible? Because I have no rights when I come back to this country. I have to cross the street when white women are walking by. They're taking our guns. They're denying rights that I fought so valiantly for. So you have a lot of Black people who in this resistance movement, because that's what the civil rights movement, part of that is, it's this resistance that has, like I said, it's in our bones. Because you can't tell me that I did all this, that we got this horrible man out of power and his whole group just openly killing people with the help of American laws, and then to come back here and you're going to do the same thing? Or do you want to be invaded next because for bad behavior? Like that's what they put at center stage. But at the same time, we have a resurgence. Well, not a resurgence. Well, I think it's like the second wave of what?
The Ku Klux Klan.
So we have the Ku Klux Klan. So they're in response. And now I remember our original question. We have the Red Scare going on. So we have all this stuff with communism.
Oh.
And I don't know how you feel about communism, but we damn sure know America hates it.
I think that, you know what, that's such an interesting point. I think that because America is so afraid of communism, we forget to look at the relationship with Black people and communism. So, like, you see a lot of Black activists pushing for communism. You see that with W.E.B. Du Bois in particular. But what people don't talk about is during World War I, there was a large migration of Black people that migrated to Russia, which is a communist state. So what they documented is that Black people were actually able to create generational wealth way quicker than they were when they were America, and it's because racism was not embedded within the fabric of the country. It was just socially. So you can walk down the street and get called a nigga all day, but there are no laws within Russia that'll keep you from being able to cut off your money. And that is something that is, I feel like, ideal theoretically, but I don't think that a communist country here in this time would work right now.
So, and I don't know. I actually, well, we can talk about that. That's another podcast of you can't get rid of racism if you have capitalism. But more to the point of what's going on with the second wave of the Ku Klux Klan and all these reactive whiteness encounters is you have people holding on to capitalism. And capitalism exists in tandem with Black people's subordination and subjugation. So what we end up having is from critical race theory, which I don't know if we're allowed to say, but we're going to say it.
CRT.
DeSantos.
And your daddy.
I love you. But if you look at a lot of the legality, things that are being passed and changed as far as legally is happening via the concept of interest convergence. So meaning that Black people will get rights at the benefit of white people or to stop white people from getting hurt. So in tandem with the Red Scare, you have Black people coming back from a horrific experience that is World War II, understanding these new dynamics of how badly we can treat each other. And Black people are now training at communist places in the United States, figuring out how to peacefully protest, which we can talk about later, and how to like really like be involved in a strategic revolution. But as soon as you hear communism in America, you clutch your pearls.
You gotta stop.
So white people were like, we got to give Black people something, or they're going to take over with the commies.
I want to know, what was it about the communists that made them so scared? What they do to the people?
Too much.
Okay.
During the Second World War, more than 1 million African Americans served in the United States military. While so many were risking their lives for freedom abroad, Black people at home were being denied equal protection of the law. The cruelty of this contradiction led to the Double V campaign.
African Americans have fought in every major war since the nation's founding. During World War I, Black leaders had encouraged African Americans to put aside their concerns about civil rights and to demonstrate their patriotism.
African Americans fought in that war, and they had come back and been very, very disappointed. The people thought racial integration was going to get jump-started after World War I. Instead, what you found was the Red Summer of 1919, where Black people were dehumanized, brutalized, murdered.
During World War II, African Americans were still being recruited to fight in segregated units, so they took a different tag.
In January 1942, one of the most influential Black newspapers in the country, the Pittsburgh Courier, published a letter. It was titled, "Should I Sacrifice to Live Half American?" In the letter, a young Black man named James G. Thompson asked, would it be too much to demand full citizenship rights in exchange for the sacrificing of his life? His letter resonated with the public, and the overwhelming response to it led the newspaper to launch its famous Double V campaign.
The Double V campaign. Victory over fascism abroad and victory over racism at home. The rhetoric of democracy becomes very, very much emboldened nationally and internationally. African Americans who are fighting overseas demand that they are compensated, and not in a monetary way, but in terms of the currency of democracy.
World War II ended in 1945 with victories abroad in Europe and Japan. And here at home, a form of victory came 3 years later when President Harry Truman signed an executive order designed to commence the desegregation of the military. But this was only the beginning. Black veterans returned home, determined to lead the battle for civil rights. And the war against Jim Crow was set in motion.
So to answer your question, you have this reaction from white people understanding the dynamics of if we don't give them something that we're going to lose. But you have like a reconfiguring in the brain of people who are not intelligent. And I mean, the U.S. is just not intelligent, meaning white people.
Not only is America a fat bully, but she a stupid fat bully. That don't even make sense.
Yes. And so you have the Ku Klux Klan in this second wave where we're talking about like, oh, well, we're not necessarily against Black people. We're really strong with Christianity, those Christian values. We want to make sure that we work hard and capitalism is God's plan. And we need this nuclear family. We need to cross our T's and dot our I's. So they hold on to this national spirit.
Yeah, Bria, that's what Jesus died on the cross for, baby. Do you not realize that when he was on the cross, he was thinking about all that, the nuclear family, he was thinking about white ally, all that.
Yeah.
He paid the price.
For us to have white women, which we don't talk about enough, and their part in like maintaining this social reproduction of hate, but called something else.
Well, yeah, okay, let's talk about it then. Because white women showed they ass during this period right here. So, what, okay, I'll let you talk, and because we got to finish this question.
Well, I mean, I think that's the basis of your question. So the reaction to the civil rights movement is not we, because it's not me, but those people really leaned into the conservativeness and to say, like, this is almost like a manifest destiny thing. Like, this is ordained by God to behave in such a manner that upholds our country's morals and values, which is all family traditionally based. And you can point to Black people and say they want all this stuff, but they have a pathology of or a culture of poverty. Like, we don't want that. That goes against what we're actually fighting for. So, and you'll see this a lot. You'll see it even today. People are still writing articles about the culture of poverty in the Black community, is that we as Black people don't have the values that are so uplifted by the nation as a whole. So in response to the civil rights movement, those things that you're seeing pop up is basically white people saying, like, look how brilliantly we live and how this can, like, uplift a country. And then you have people fighting, Black people specifically, fighting to change the way we know is best to live. And we see that now with Black Lives Matter, right?
Yeah, we do.
Because now we're policing how we protest. We're policing how we form families. Like, we're policing about having children, who raises those children.
Leaning back to that conservative
ideology
and thought and clutching our pearls again.
And that's the status quo in this country. So anything that is separate from that, because you can have Black families that are nuclear who don't appreciate trans women, Black trans women and trans men. You have all those people.
There's a lot of Black families like that.
Yeah, and they don't like extended kinship formations. They don't think gays should adopt. And it's not just white. It's not just Black. You have
Hispanics. They perplex me.
Super conservative.
Ooh, they confuse me.
So, and I think that's where we see a resurgence, because America is really good, and Michelle Alexander said this in the new Jim Crow. What part of Americanism is having racism be adaptable. So if we have this reemergence of a new kind of resistance movement, then we have to, as white people, think of something that can outmaneuver whatever changes they want to make. If we have to give them something, the Civil Rights Act, let's give them that to shut them up, to make sure communism doesn't invade.
That's the same damn thing they did with that George Floyd. And
yes.
No, they didn't manipulate us like that.
And what did we get?
We got the little donut out. Girl, nothing.
We got Juneteenth.
Bria, who are the Dixiecrats and what is their connection to the civil rights movement?
Dixiecrats? Dixiecrats? You want to talk about Dixiecrats? Let's talk about Dixiecrats then, God.
For y'all that don't know, a Dixiecrat is a cool conservative-ass way of saying that any Southern Democrat who seceded from the party in 1948 in opposition to its policy extending the civil rights. Say it ain't so. Dixiecrats. Want to talk about Dixiecrats? A Dixiecrat was literally the folks that split away from the Democratic Party in 1948 because of racial segregation and wanting to be lost in the sauce of Southern culture, and they tried to literally create their own party. Shout out to Strom Thurmond of South Carolina. He was elected as the president of the party. You know, context is key, right? As the Democratic Party became more pro-civil rights than the 1940s, many Southern Democrats felt disenfranchised. Furthermore, many were downright and refused to go along with the Democratic Party progressive platform. Democrats and Republicans did musical chairs and switched sides on that ass, man.
So kind of stemming from what I just talked about, this emergence of a different, more pure way of life. I say that with quotation marks. They were a party that opposed racial integration and wanted to retain Jim Crow laws and Jim Crow's laws in the North. They also wanted to retain white supremacy as well, in the face of possible federal intervention. So federal intervention is, we're talking about laws, right? Mm-hmm. So they're saying that, well, in the South, we want more of the same, which is, it's literally, we're just repeating the same arguments. And now we have a cute little name for a party that is having this emergence along with, like, as you said, the second wave of the Ku Klux Klan that are holding on to what they think is the proper way to live life.
The what?
That it's like the boundaries of how to live, because all of this rests upon the idea that of the status quo. So who gets to define the status quo?
White supremacy.
Yeah, people in power, which in this country has always been white supremacy. It's white supremacy now. Those are the people that get to define what is basically what borders our values and morals. Anyone who does not do that is considered a deviant.
Enemy of the state.
Yeah.
So the Dixiecrats were a voting party. Where was this voting party like primarily located?
So this was in the South.
Okay. So like how did they get their laws passed?
Well, so all of that is it sounds kind of sci-fi, but it's not. This is just the life that we've always lived in.
We live in a movie, Bria.
It's this continual interruption of Black people doing, and this is the paradox, and it's, am I allowed to swear? It's fucking laughable, like what they're doing. And like I said, it's an interruption of voting, of political positions, because you have to remember this all comes down to legality. Once Black people are able to infiltrate and have a seat at the table of what's defining state and federal laws, then things can change. But what's always happened is that, like I said, there's those interruptions, those people who, I mean, you just did the podcast with the Jim Crow South. That was all to that terroristic time period is all to make sure that we don't have power, which civically everyone has power, but we don't talk about it a lot. They all they say is like, we need to work. They don't talk about, you need to vote. Like, you need to go out to the polls. You need to do whatever you can to make sure you get a right to vote. But not only that, they're stopping us at every turn. Somebody is in the way, making sure that we don't vote. So I think part of what the Dixiecrats did in their political positioning is to make sure that they had a louder voice at the polls and in Congress, doing all of that.
So they use scare tactics very often to be able to get their point across, or to be able to push their agenda. Do you have any examples of like the scare tactics that they used?
Well, I don't know. And this is so, I mean, it's a scare tactic to me, but I don't think it's a scare tactic that people would equate to scare tactic, because it's not the same as catching Black boys in the middle of the night and then lynching them. Yes, and then setting them on fire.
And then selling the parts about it that ain't charged.
Yeah, we can just keep on going with the terror. But with this, what I think it is making people feel less than by attaching some sentimental value to Jim Crow. Like the fact that we can romanticize a time period, which is what the Dixiecrats are saying. Like, they want to go back to that segregationist mentality, which, I mean, let's be honest, some Black people want that too. Maybe they don't want the terror, but they want separate.
Niggas do want to be separate. What is you talking about?
And so that's part of the terror, though, is that the Dixiecrats, if they word it correctly, you can appeal to Black people as well.
Yes, the majority of Black people are very conservative. But when you talk about romanticizing this era, they just remind me of the birth of the nation. And it's the other movie, the Disney movie of the woman on the plantation, white woman.
Oh, Gone with the Wind, please.
Yes, romanticized. When we're talking about the romanticization of this time period, I don't think people really focus on that, because like I was saying, you see Jimmy Carter, he streamed Birth of Nation at the White House, and he just like, whoa, this is the greatest time period. It ain't nothing. It can't get no better than this. And then you see Gone with the Wind. You see enslaved people on the plantation. They happy. The sun is shining. They get the eggs. They scrambling it for master. And they just love being there. And the lie got to the point where white people started to believe it.
Mm-hmm.
They knew them niggas didn't want to be there.
Yep.
They knew that. When Minnie said, "I don't burn no chicken," she meant that. And it really was, house workers really was shitting in folks' pies. And I know it's all types of instances and rumors of scary and stories of white people being on the slick murdered, hurt, being brutalized by other Black people, and it's the fact that they still carry this notion that our ancestors wanted that was the best place for them, and there was nothing greater for them.
Well, yeah, and you can sell that. You can sell that story. It's a PR narrative that works.
They did sell that story,
and I mean, you had expressed that you had white people believing it, and unfortunately, you also have Black people believing it, and that's good racism. If you can get Black people to believe in their own subjugation, that's PR excellent. Like, you can't get any better than that. And that's what we continually have to rework. I still have people in my classes, which, I mean, I let them talk. I hope that they get to a place where they can examine their lives and their family lives, their communities' lives on their own. But they come into my class saying that racism does not exist anymore. And these are young Black people.
What they did? What?
Yeah. So that's... when we're talking about the civil rights movement, this resistance movement, and white supremacy coupled, what ends up happening is that you can always say it's a racial fallacy to say, like, well, we had a civil rights movement. And thank God for Martin Luther King Jr. and that he gave the I Have a Dream speech, because he was able in one fell swoop to end racism. And then we got Obama.
Yeah, and thank God for Harriet Tubman sitting on the front of the bus. Because if she hadn't sat there, we'd never be able to sit in front of the bus ever.
Yeah.
Yes, and that's it. Them the only people in history. And then, Rosa Parks had helped the people get to the Underground Railroad. So, like, that's history. That's our history right there. Then.
But it's not.
You sure?
It's not. It's so much more nuanced than that. And I think people are really afraid to look at what white supremacy is capable of. And I don't hate talking about white supremacy during Black History Month, but you can't not talk about it. And I'm very serious in my studies about what white supremacy does. Because, and I will always say this, white supremacy does not discriminate. White supremacy does not discriminate.
I think they don't realize that.
Yes.
And it's just so perplexing to me to see people who are victims of white supremacy still try to carry out the actions of white supremacy and vote in ways in which it does not favor them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that white supremacy consumes even white women, and they still do not realize how it negatively impacts them.
Yeah, no, of course. And that's, again, one of the terrifyingly beautiful things about what white supremacy does. Like, America as itself, like, if its project was to maintain white supremacy and in any way, shape, or form, no matter what kind of resistant movement was happening, they get an A+. They get an A+, because the adaptability of racism in this country, the things that happened during the civil rights movement in terms of white people's response, despite the fact that a lot of us were working together. I feel like this is one of the, besides the abolitionist movement, during the civil rights movement, there were so many different groups of marginalized communities, including poor white people.
Mm-hmm.
But yet, in the end, what did we get after the civil rights movement? Because we did too much together. What did we get?
Bullshit.
Drugs in our community and the start of mass incarceration.
Shout out to Ronald Reagan. Shout out to Richard Nixon. Shout out to Bill Clinton.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because they did all that, and they did their job well. Yes, they did.
This is correct. For those who don't know, the Triple K Incorporated would burn crosses as a form of intimidation, basically. But where did they get this from? This wonderful, beautifully made, very racist movie right here, The Birth of a Nation.
Responsible for the rebirth of the Ku Klux Klan. It had received this romantic, glowing, heroic portrait. The Klan never had the ritual of burning the cross. That was something that D.W. Griffith came up with because he thought that it was a great cinematic image. So it was literally an instance of life imitating art.
You know what, Bria? I'm really glad that you brought up these very small communities that came together to work with the civil rights movement. So let's go more in depth with that. So my next question is what organizations like SNCC and the participants of Freedom Summer were integrated projects what messages did they send to the world?
So I think the messages that they sent.
Hold on, because a lot of people don't know what SNCC is or these the Freedom Summer. So let's talk about that a little bit.
So I know SNCC was to read out the whole thing, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and it was founded in 1960s in the wake of student-led sit-ins, which I can't even imagine how that would work at Mississippi State, at segregated lunch counters across the South. And they became a major channel of student participation in the civil rights movement. So that's one of those things. It's like Du Bois's dreams of, community engagement and social transformation really came into focus there, because everyone, well, not everyone, but a good chunk of people were like, this is unacceptable. Again, what happened after World War II, like it was infectious, this idea. And like I said, training at communist,
training camp.
Yeah.
The folk Highlander School up in Tennessee.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So people were learning how to constructively disrupt white supremacy.
But it was still done in a Eurocentric perspective. And I think that's probably, especially with SNCC, because SNCC was, it was all nonviolent.
Yes.
And all the research of the nonviolence actions of SNCC comes from Europe. They went to Sweden and they did these research for years and came back and brought these ideas back. And it's just white on white crime, if you ask me. But it did its purpose because they were trying to keep from being labeled as violent people, as well as to make white people look bad in the media. That was the whole purpose of it.
Yeah, no, and we can get, because I can have a whole debate about the nonviolent versus violent sort of conundrum that we have to face as Black people, because any decision that we're forced to make is extra labor than what white people have to do. Because we have to, it goes, and I know how you feel about Du Bois, but I love Du Bois, and it goes back to this idea of double consciousness in the veil, and that we have to perceive how white people are going to take our actions. So I do think, and we don't talk about it enough, how clever and strategic Black people have to be. Mm-hmm. But then you're going to sit there and call us dumb and that we have a culture of poverty. Okay.
Girl, see, okay. Because now we get into that period where we're seeing the actions of Black people and how they're going about it. And might I add, they went about it so many different ways. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't just uniform, but they were all working towards the same goal. So when we're talking about Freedom Summer, you see this is the project to help integrate the bus system.
Yep.
Okay, so you got all these mixed race, the Black and white men, women, boys and girls there on the bus, and they're getting to these different towns, and every town that they go to in the South, they are met with vitriol. Mm-hmm. They when they got to Alabama, they had to literally run for their lives. They chased them all over. They tried to attempt them. They got beat up multiple times. So again, that's the message that they took. What message do you think white people received from these acts of integrated justice, I guess, trying to receive justice?
So what I think it did, and I love that you said it, and I hope this is kind of maybe what you're searching for, maybe you have an agreement, is it, and I love saying this word, it disrupted that PR narrative that Black people are animals, that they're savages, that they only know violence, and that they don't deserve the kind of rights that they're fighting for. And I think those white people who are what I like to call well-meaning white people, they couldn't buy that PR anymore, because they were seeing look what do you mean they're savages? We're going to go fight with them because you white people are doing too much.
Not y'all trash. Look.
In the summer of 1964, 3 civil rights workers were abducted and murdered in Neshoba County, Mississippi. They were dedicated workers for CORE, the Congress of Racial Equality, helping to get Black voters registered. Those responsible for their murders were barely punished. Let me tell you about it. I'm the young Black mayor, your #1 history influencer. The Mississippi murders of James Carney, age 21, Andrew Goodman, 20, and Michael Schwerner, 24, is an embarrassing American horror story. The trio went to Neshoba County, Mississippi to set up a freedom school to prepare black voters to pass the literacy and comprehension test required by the state to vote. White supremacists throughout the South resulted to bombing and murdering black-owned buildings and people to dissuade others from coming to help fight for the voting rights of blacks. After the three met with members of Mount Zion Church on Memorial Day 1964 in Longdale, Mississippi, the church was burned down by KKK members. On June 21st, 1964, the three were arrested and abducted by police after a return trip to the church site. James, Andrew, and Michael were shot at close range and buried at a dam near Philadelphia, Mississippi. The FBI launched a major investigation. While dragging the rivers in search of the three, the FBI found 14 African-American bodies, one wearing a Corps shirt. On August 4th, 1964, the remains of the three men were found after someone involved was paid $30,000 for information. In December, 21 men were indicted, 7 men were charged, but no one served more than 6 years. This included Deputy Sheriff Cecil Ray Price. No one else was charged for 41 years, until one man was convicted on 3 counts of manslaughter in 2005. He was already 80 years old. The case was closed in 2016, despite a long list of perpetrators. No one else will ever be charged. This was the impetus behind the film Mississippi Burning.
So, I think the most interesting, my favorite part of the civil rights movement is always going to be the Children's Crusade that happened down in Alabama. Are you familiar with the children? Oh, girl, yes. So, this was right after Martin Luther King has just gotten out of jail, right? Mm-hmm. He just got out of jail, and everybody, all the black people in the South, they tired. They're like, look, Martin, we ain't got no more money. We ain't got no money to get bailed out. We can't miss no more work. We still got shit to do. We walking to work. My feet hurt. Like, we got to do something different. So Martin like, okay, send the kids out there. So they send all the children out there. It's like school-age children from the age of 5 all the way up to the age of 18. So the goal of what the Children's Crusade was to pack out the jails. Pack it out to the point where you can't put no more niggas in jail. Mm-hmm. And then on top of that, to also show the violence in which the police inflicted on black people. Yeah. So the one day, all the little nigga children, they done miss school. They down there, they marching on the streets. It's just kids out there. They got on their nice Sunday dresses. They got on white the little socks with the little fluffy ruffles at the end. They marching, they singing. The police is done set the dogs out on the little girls. They done turned on the fire hydrants. I'm telling you, now this is the beautiful thing about being black. When you watching it in a room full of white people, the tone is sad. They ashamed. They don't want to watch that shit. I'm in the back laughing. Yep. I'm in the back tickled because I done watched a 5-year-old girl fly across the street because they done set a whole fire hydrant out. And she just said, whoop. And I'm tickled. But it's so brilliant. And then you see, like, they all getting packed out into these police cars. They're singing. So, like, they're singing different, like, chants of freedom. They going to jail. They not scared. Mm-hmm. They in there chilling. And it's just one of those examples of how brilliant black people are. Because, I mean, how crazy, how inhumane do you have to be to send children, young boys and girls to jail?
Well, yeah. So ask me again what the Negro problem in America is.
They keep on going to jail. That's the problem.
You're going to say, like you said, you are going to put children in a situation and then watch. So you're in this room with white people and watch the reactions of these white police officers as though they have no humanity. Because how dangerous are these children that this is what we need to resort to? It's just these old tactics of dogs and water and violence. But you're going to turn around and call us the violent ones. Mm-hmm. And please do another $1 million study of the Negro problem when we should be looking at how are we looking at the police and our reactions to peaceful protests. Like, who's the clown here, really?
And I feel like, again, when we are talking about Freedom Summer, we have to talk about the 2 black men and the white man that were killed somewhere in the American South. They were riding together. I believe this was in Alabama, and they were driving in a separate car from the bus, and they went missing.
Mhm.
And then a few days later, they found all of them, the black men and this white man, killed together in one location. I think they were defigured. You could barely recognize who they were. And that's another example of like the brutality of like whiteness and how they reacted to it. They bombed a church.
Yeah.
Like, who bombed? If you're so Christian, you love God, how can you go into a sacred place and bomb a church and kill, 4 black girls?
Mhm.
They dead, they gone. But what you intended for bad turned around and went against you. And now there's publicity all over the news and the media about this church in Alabama. But
well, no, Jennifer Mueller, she actually has a great piece. It's called White Racial Ignorance. And it talks about sort of the cognitive rewiring that white people have to do to not feel that shame, to not feel that guilt for all these atrocities that you can't explain away, that you can't put on black people for their reactions. And it's such a beautiful, like, work of intellectual thought, because as Jenny is a white person, or racialized as white, and she said we need to talk about this, because this is just not going to fly moving forward, especially if America holds itself to these really moral ideas, which goes back to Gunner's piece in An American Dilemma.
D-Day was the day, I tell you. This was the day where every student in Birmingham knew that it was going to happen.
But you've got to remember that all of the planning was a secret.
Good. Good morning, children. Up in the morning and out to school. The teacher is teaching the golden rule.
I remember that morning I woke up with my mind on freedom.
Oh, I took special pain with putting a little starch in my blouse.
Got my toothbrush and I got the toothpaste, the soap.
Because I had a feeling that I wouldn't be coming home.
Ring, ring goes the bell.
This doctor pushed D-Day early in the morning, but they wouldn't even use D-Day. They use all that jive talk.
Don't forget, kids, there's going to be a party in the park, and don't forget your toothbrushes, because luncheon will be served.
Back in the classroom, open your book.
Now, everybody who's listening knows what the deal is.
D-Day was the day. My mother said, okay, Gwen, don't go to that march. Hey, I mean, don't go. You go to school. I told my mother, I said, I hear you. We were raised not to lie. So I didn't tell her lies that I wasn't going. I said, I hear you.
We would have people picked out. Your job is to turn this fire alarm, turn that fire alarm, get the football team, basketball team, get the cheerleaders, get the band.
It was right at 11 o'clock when they arrived. They came up to the fence with a sign that just said, it's time.
When we said, let's go for the windows.
And I told others, come on, let's go. And I looked around and, all I could see was my own fanny almost, I hollered back up at those kids, but you said you were going to go. You promised. And that's when kids started coming.
They were coming out of windows, coming out of doors.
It's so beautiful. You wouldn't believe it. Mrs. Scurry turned her back as we got up.
And we took it from there.
I'm excited about this question right here. So my question to you is, why do you think that white Americans are so accepting of Martin Luther King Jr.'s teaching and his nonviolent approach, but so unaccepting to the teachings and ideologies of characters like Malcolm X or Fred Hampton?
Well, I think, and we've touched upon it in our talk tonight, is that the idea of nonviolence is more accepting, I guess, and it works in tandem with this idea of we kind of have to give Black people something so that we don't turn into a communist nation, because as Black people, just the basic numbers, we don't have the numbers to make drastic change in this country. We just don't. if we've stayed around 13% for, I mean, we were at like 5% when we first got here, but 13% for basically the rest of the time. We do not have the numbers. We need white people to be on our side. We particularly would like poor white people, since they're also oppressed, but because of racism's adaptability, we've constantly been pit against each other. So I think Martin Luther King was enough for white people to say, like, okay, I get what he's saying. Content of character, not about race. Maybe this is a beautiful dream. It's acceptable. We can subjugate in other ways where they won't notice. Where Malcolm X Malcolm X called it like he saw it and knew that you can say whatever you want. You are just going to have a new system that basically keeps us subjugated, and I'm not here for that. And he was not afraid to go against his own community, to go against Martin, to go against anybody who said it was any different.
He went against Elijah Muhammad at the end. So, like, that's real. Why does everybody so scared to talk about that?
No, I mean, we can talk about...
Well, hold on, because first I want to talk about, because this is my question. Do you think that, I feel like Martin Luther King had, like, internalized Black hatred within him. And I feel like they can be seen through not only like the way that he wrote, but it could be seen in his attraction to white women.
So Martin is a very complicated man, and privileged.
Yeah.
He comes from a legacy of well-to-do Black family and an intellectual family.
I don't think people realize that Martin was like hand-selected for this position.
Yeah.
It's not like Martin stood up and was like, choose me.
No, trained. Because remember, what Black people do is often strategic. And to put Martin at the face of a revolution, the way that he spoke, the way that he carried himself, he seemed very non-threatening. And I mean, we've continually had different intellectual giants in the Black community pitted against each other so that we remain divided. When we know at the end of Martin's life that
he wanted to do what Malcolm was doing.
Yeah, they were talking.
In Malcolm's life, he wanted to do what Martin was doing.
Yeah, because there's ways to incorporate both, but in the media, what the media was back then, this separation kept people basically in line so that we've never gotten the numbers together successfully, because there's always factions within what we're doing, which some of that is okay. Because when we think about Fanon, like, I love Fanon, but I'm not like, I know me personally, like my reaction to violence, my reaction to being subjugated myself is not violent. I will only become violent if you like kick my cat. But in terms of like racial matters, I choose resistance in a way that fits me and what I know I can be best at. And I think, and I mean, we can do a longer thing about this at the end, but I think most people, what we have to do instead of performing what these leaders have told us to perform is to be true to ourselves, to self-actualize, and basically do resistance in our own way. If that's violence, then that's violence.
I think violence is so cute. Like, it really is. I feel like it helps speed shit up.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, some people, me as a non-violent person, I definitely want to work with violent people. I'll stay in my lane and you stay in yours and we can make shit happen.
Oh, it's niggas for both parts now. Mm-hmm. It's niggas to be in the limelight and niggas to be in the background. I don't think people realize that two things can be true at the same time.
Yep.
Now back to Martin Luther King and his love for whiteness. When I talk about his love for whiteness, like recently, and I'm excited for when like the CIA drop all the secret information about Martin Luther King so we can learn more about him. Mm-hmm. But you know, we know that before he chose Coretta, he was in love with a white woman, and she was a lunch lady, mm-hmm. not even a school teacher. She was second up the hot lunches and whatnot. Mm-hmm.
Why do I preach self first for Black women? Because you will never be enough for someone who wants something else. Today's example is MLK, who married Coretta Scott and then cheated on her left, right, and center with a bunch of white scallywags, probably because they reminded him of the low-class white woman who was his first love. Some of you may not know this, but he was engaged before Coretta to a white woman called Betty Moitz. So this article has more information, but all you need to know is that Betty was a cafeteria lady at the university where MLK got his doctorate. After he graduated from Morehouse, he went to Crozer up north to get his PhD. And Betty was a cafeteria lady there, not a college student, not a socialite, a lunch lady. Unless you think I'm being a hater and secretly she was very deep, here's what she said about their relationship. I listened, Betty says, and he'd just talk and talk. She was listening because she had nothing to say. How could she contribute? Here was a man with world-changing ideas and a woman who probably didn't graduate from high school. What was the attraction? Marcus Woods, King's friend, recalls he was rather proud of the fact he was able to socialize openly with a white girl. There it is. And this, Betty says, he was always trying to get me to go with him to restaurants in Chester. I was embarrassed to let him know I had never been to any of those places. In those days, who went to restaurants? Well, people with money, Betty. That's who. Betty was born and raised in poverty, but MLK was a child of privilege. So why insist on a relationship with a woman who was not socially, economically, or intellectually his equal? Because she was white. That's not news. People often say men like this get the leftover white women. And that's true, but it's not because they can't get better ones. Let's examine this. A man like MLK, being born in his time period, could not have married a white woman of equal social status. But modern black men do the exact same thing. Look at Tiger Woods. He's been on the PGA Tour almost as long as I've been alive. He went to Yale. He could have married some blue-blooded Mayflower Dar type if that's what he likes. But he married a nanny and then cheated on her with a bunch of strippers and Waffle House waitresses. This man was a billionaire. But he likes gutter women because it's all he feels worthy of. These men have issues with their own blackness, so they feel like any non-black person is above them. But yet you notice these same men have absurdly high criteria for black women. Look at Coretta. Educated, good background, pretty, brilliant, a superwoman. She was a trained opera singer, gave it all up for MLK. And what was Betty Moitz? White. Do you think for a second MLK would have entertained the idea of marriage to an uneducated, unattractive black woman cafeteria lady? Yeah, I didn't think so.
He did not have an education. She would just sit up there and listen to him because she didn't have the words to be able to hold a conversation with him, and he loved her through and through. And also, when I talk about this idea of Eurocentrism, I feel like you can see it within his writings. Now, there's without a shadow of a doubt, Martin Luther King Jr. was incredibly intelligent. But when I go over, especially the last piece that he wrote right before he passed away, not only was it extremely eerie. Do you know the last piece that he wrote? I don't want to misquote it because it's not the letter from Birmingham jail, but it's like literally the last piece that he wrote. He foreshadows his death within this piece, and he dies like a couple days later, as we know, in Memphis, Tennessee.
Yeah.
But throughout the beginnings of his writings and stuff, he's talking about the likes of Aristotle, Plato. He's talking about like Roman, Greek mythology, and you can see how Eurocentrism truly affected his worldview. And even to this day, you can see how deeply Christianity was embedded within his writing. So in a way, you could also make the argument that through Christianity, you could see the Eurocentrism. And I just feel like, although it was impressive, I feel like I wanted a little bit more from him.
All we say to America is be true to what you said on paper. If I lived in China or even Russia or any totalitarian country, maybe I could understand some of these illegal injunctions. Maybe I could understand the denial of certain basic First Amendment privileges because they haven't committed themselves to that over there. But somewhere I read of the freedom of assembly. Somewhere I read of the freedom of speech. Somewhere I read of the freedom freedom of press. Somewhere I read that the greatness of America is the right to protest far right. And so just as I say we aren't going to let any dogs or water hoses turn us around, we aren't going to let any injunction turn us around. Well, I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead. But it really doesn't matter with me now, because I've been to the mountaintop. I don't mind. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And He's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. So I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
Yeah. And I think that's when you think about if Martin was on a collision course with Malcolm in terms of what we're thinking in with this resistance movement, making him a martyr at that time, like the strategy from white supremacy in that, killing him before he kind of went to that side is smarter, because we can deal with him as a martyr. We can't deal with him becoming somebody who's more open to being violent. So can you imagine?
Can I imagine Martin Luther King spraying the set down? I don't know. You know, they've been real creative with these Black History flyers. Have you been seeing the black victim holding the Casamigo bottles and the blunt?
Oh, yeah.
I think I can see it. I think a lot of people can see it. But let's focus. Let's shift towards like Malcolm X, because like them niggas, they hated Martin for real, but they was terrified of the likes of Fred Hampton and the likes of Malcolm X and the likes of the Black Panther Party as a whole.
Well, no, I mean, if you look at like Malcolm and what the Black Panther Party was doing, they were really making moves that threatened the ideology of American life. Martin didn't do that. Martin was trying to almost like uplift what American life could be, where Malcolm and the Black Panther said, you guys are doing all this shit wrong. We need just a whole new revamp because you've been telling us lies. You obviously cannot be trusted. I don't know why our ideology is off of what you wanted it to be, because it doesn't work for everybody. So that's terrifying. A change in ideology is terrifying. A change in ideology is a change in the status quo. And it means that what the Black Panthers wanted, like people not to be subjugated. I told you, America does not work and will never work if there isn't somebody that can be subjugated, if there isn't somebody that can somehow be used to uplift other people. America does not work without that. There's something in this proximity to whiteness, which we talked about in Keeping Up with the Caucasians, that we get a different, almost clearer view of what's happening in the white community, and we do not have time for it. You cannot sit there as a Black person and tell me that racism doesn't exist, because I've been behind enemy lines. Racism does exist, and it's very strong.
You're wrong. Candace Owens said racism don't exist, and she wished that she could live in a world that was like the world of her grandfather.
Candace Owens is a pundit. She's a pretty face and a talking head for white people. You can literally look at Candace Owens, and there's some things that I do like that Candace Owens says. But in the large scale, we have to remember that Candace Owens is a mouthpiece for white people to say what they actually want to say. So what they want to say, they tell Candace, and Candace says it.
I want to live in a world like my granddaddy. I don't see nothing wrong with that. He was a sharecropper.
Oh, boy.
This just sounds so beautiful to me. Final question. Who are the underrated, non-melanated, clear heroes of the civil rights movement?
Say it in another way. I do have an answer, but I want to clarify. So say it in another way.
Who are the hueless heroes of the civil rights movement?
Hueless?
Male sapiens, if you will.
Like white people?
The Ghostbusters. The untitled documents. The blank sheets of paper.
Oh, you're looking for a specific answer?
Yeah, I'm looking for who was the white people that did some good during this time period.
Since you got your degree and you know every fucking thing.
So, and I don't know if this is exactly what you were looking for, but in terms of when I hear this question, I think of all the people that really worked to make this happen in tiny ways. And I always think about that. A lot of my students are perplexed as to how racism can end, because it seems like such a big thing.
You think it can end?
No, but I don't want to say that on air.
Oh, we gotta rip the Band-Aid off. Chris, look, Santa Claus is not real and racism won't end.
No, it's what I said before. America will not exist without racism. So we get rid of racism, we get rid of America.
What if we just invert the racism and we just be racist to the white people?
That won't work. But we have essentially what I tell my students is to make tiny changes. So we do have these really prolific figures during the civil rights movement, and we latch onto them because they sort of are the ideal versions of what we could be. But for a lot of us, that's not a reality. Part of the reason racism persists and why our social institutions are maintained under the edict of white supremacy is because we're too damn tired to actually make big changes. But we can do little things. And I feel like during the civil rights movement, in a lot of different parts of history, in the future, we're going to talk about the Black Lives Matter movement, where there are people who are working tirelessly behind the scenes. So even though we don't have marches as much anymore, we don't have these protests, we don't have the hashtags, people are doing shit. And they're trying to make sure that in some way we are affecting policy, that we are getting seats at the table where we previously didn't have seats, and hopefully we are not co-opted.
Oh, we built our own table. Marble, actually.
Which, obviously, there's people doing that, but they're not advertising it because we see what happens when we advertise what we're doing. We're bombed. We're co-opted. We're killed. These are the things we know from the historical record, that if you make any kind of wave, any kind of progress that does not benefit white supremacy, it's going to be interrupted in some way.
You just, that statement plus the statement you made earlier just made me have a light bulb moment, because you just said racism evolves, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you said that there's always gonna be a way to find oppression, and it just reminds me of my social media, because it does not benefit white supremacy, so social media finds a way to suppress my content.
Yeah.
And that is a form of racism.
Yes, no, of course. So you can think about how algorithms are a form of racism.
And AIs too, because they have built-in biasness and racism, because the creators that created them have their own bias and racism within them.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's the stunning thing about racism. And I mean, it sucks to be on the other end of it. But if you look at it without any sentiment, the fact that it's maintained in the way that it is, and you have all these well-meaning white people walking around like, I don't understand, I love black people, my gardener's black. That's part of the problem, is that it's so hard to recognize now that even black people who are saying, the racism has happened to me, black men getting killed in the street, black women getting killed at traffic stops. It's not enough. it's just not enough what's happening because it's so adaptable and because people just, like you said, we need to start shaming people because, I mean, you can say the Nazis are bad, but I mean, that was not over and done with.
Oh, these folks, they different. They cut from a different cloth. See, here over in Germany, they was cut from tissue paper. These Ku Klux Klansmen and all these folks, they is cut from bandana paper. They real.
Yep.
Yeah, they different. Now, Bria, out of all the books you done read and all the lectures you done sat in and taught, you can't think of one male sapien in which did like some good shit during the civil rights movement. Now, I understand that change happens slowly, but it ain't one name you can call out. Lord have mercy.
You want a white person?
Yeah, that's what I'm asking for.
Lord.
A palm-colored person, if you will.
I just feel like I could argue against all of them. I mean, JFK being assassinated was terrible. No, I'm drawing a blank.
Damn, Bria.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Don't be sorry, ho, be happy. Lord, gee, what?
I feel like people expect that reaction from me.
I just don't like the people that are in the limelight ever, so.
When I did an episode called The Hughless Heroes, right? Where I went over and I pointed out the good white people from like abolitionist movement, civil rights movement. I always think about the white people that helped Rosa Parks, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Virginia and what's her husband's name? They the ones that trained Rosa Parks over at the Highlander School, right?
Yep.
So then they was like, okay, it was a little girl. She sat on the bus first and they said, okay, we're going to recreate this, but we're going to systematically put you into a costume. Because, your Rosa was relatively young when she sat on the bus, but they dressed her up like a little old maiden, like a maid.
Mm-hmm.
You're not gonna speak? Hey, maid. I see you got on your maid outfit like you always do. I don't blame you.
Maid
you got it clean.
outfit. I have on a t-shirt.
You got it
Get
clean.
the out of here.
Ain't that what you clean with? You need to buy her a fur like you bought me one.
Get this hoe out the house.
And they told her sit in front and don't move. And then what she did. And then when she went to jail, they bailed her out. You didn't think about them folks.
No, and let me tell you why. As you're talking about some of this, and I think I'm very sweet and lovely, but I don't care. I'm sorry, I don't care about the unsung.
You said the unseasoned?
I don't care about them. Like, part of it's so exhausting being Black in this country.
I'm tired right now.
We wake up tired.
Yeah, I'm on the Red Bull right now.
It's just, I remember when George Floyd was killed, and I have a lot of white friends because of my background.
Was they apologizing to you?
They were apologizing to me, and then they were outraged, just absolutely outraged. I can't believe this is still happening. How do you deal with this? I said, I don't give a fuck. I don't want to hear about how outraged you are. Be outraged with your white friends. Please talk to your white friends about it. I'm too tired I just watched another one of us get murdered. Like, you handle your people.
Ooh.
Please.
Not put your dogs on a leash.
So yes, I always tell my class, as long as Black people, Black African, as long as we've been in this terrible journey with white people together, there have been good white people helping us. There has never been a time where we had to actively recruit white people to help us. There's always been good white people.
They groupies, yeah, they follow along.
I don't care about them. They should be doing that.
Yeah.
All the horrific things that have happened and continue to happen to us in the justifying that we have to do, like, I'm sorry, I can't do it. Even being half white myself and being raised with white people, I'm not patting any of them on the back. I'm over it. And please don't ask me in February.
So Bria, you're not gonna make no invitation cards to the cookout? It's not in your job description?
I mean, maybe, but you're gonna eat last.
We not inviting them. No, ma'am.
You eating last.
Shout out to the slaves.
Yeah, shout out to the slaves. You feel me? Shout out to Harriet Tubman.
Shout out to she's a real nigga.
Shout out to the real niggas.
And shout out again to all those people who hate my guts.
Y'all are doing a justice and an effort to the world. Keep breaking these men down one at a time.
You are obsessed and sick.
And we are back with the Big Black Shout Out, the blackest shout out in the world. The Big Black Shout Out is an opportunity to help you find Black-owned brands to help circulate back into our Black communities, as well as to allow my audience members to find new Black-owned hidden gems. So I personally would like to shout out Shauna Tillman. I am so happy and proud of her. For those who do not know, Shauna is an amazing advocate for the Black community. She has her own nonprofit and she does a whole lot of extracurriculars. But in particular, this weekend, we had the amazing opportunity to go to an advocacy boot camp located in Grenada, Mississippi, where we were placed in the rankings of some of Mississippi's most official Black lives, those who actually do the work, and they talk that shit behind it, but they also do the work. So shout out to the advocacy boot camp. When I tell you guys, not only was I thoroughly impressed with the amount of the caliber of people there, I was so amazed at the amount of information I was able to learn, as well as the amount of listening ears that I was able to share all of my thoughts with, as well as the different types of programs and ways to learn how to advocate, to learn about coalitions. So next year, if you consider yourself an advocate, or if you want to learn how to better advocate for yourself, I suggest that you get that ass back to the advocacy boot camp. Shout out to you, Shauna.
Alabama's gotten me so upset. Tennessee made me lose my rest. Everybody knows about Mississippi gone down. And to see it, I know you can feel it. It's all in the air. I can't stand this pressure much longer. Somebody say a prayer. Alabama's got me so upset, and Tennessee's made me lose my rest. Everybody knows about Mississippi gone down. Hound dogs on my trail, school children sitting in jail, black cat across my path. I think every day's gonna be my last.
Conversation with me. Very well needed, very opaque, very clear conversation.
Thank you.
White. And I love that. You know, if it's not white, it ain't right. Yes, and thank you for being Afrocentric today. So I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk to the Black community. Is there anything that you wanted to say before we go?
So what I wanted to say, and echoes from the last time I was on this beautiful show that you do, is to educate yourself. Knowledge, knowledge, knowledge. That does not necessarily mean get a higher ed degree, but it means that you have to be an active participant in your own life, and knowledge is a way to do that. Do not let the status quo or anybody tell you that there is only one way to do things. To protect ourselves, we need to learn as much as possible. And we need to learn from as many sources as possible. Because racism is adaptable, we need to be too.
That is powerful, Bria. Well, I want to thank you for being Afrocentric. I want to thank all my listeners so much for choosing to be Afrocentric today. I just want to give you guys a few reminders. Let's please remember that Black Lives Matter. Let's listen and protect Black women and children. And remember that the only thing that you must do in this lifetime is be Black and die. And here at the Afrocentric Podcast, we're just civilized people having civilized conversations. Tell the people bye, Bria.
Bye, everybody. Happy Black History Month.
That's so sweet. Bye-bye, y'all. I'll talk to you soon.
You've called people like Martin Luther King, who just got a Nobel Peace Prize, an Uncle Tom. Is this correct? First? Well, I'd rather say that in the States, there's a law that has recently been passed, or a decision handed down by the court, wherein if you call someone an Uncle Tom, they can sue you for libel.
Well,
so I never refer to them as Uncle Toms. I would say that Uncle Martin is my friend.
Uncle Martin is your friend, yet you would disagree with his approach to what he wants to accomplish.
Definitely. If his approach would bring about what the black man in America needs to completely eliminate the problem that we have, I would say well and good. But I very much doubt that anyone who adopts the approach that Martin Luther King has been teaching to our people in that country can point to any meaningful gains that has actually served to solve the problem.
Black Muslims have sometimes, whether you have or not, and I think probably you have sometimes, it seemed to me, been preaching hate to meet hate.
I don't advocate any kind of hate.
But there's a lot of talk that sounds very much like it.
No, I think that the guilt complex of the American white man is so profound until when you begin to analyze the real condition of the black man in America, instead of the American white man eliminating the causes that create that condition, he tries to cover it up by accusing his accusers of teaching hate. But actually, they're just exposing him for being responsible for what exists.
Well, that's something of an argument, but I've heard speeches made by some of the people of your group. I think I've heard you make speeches. It seemed to me that you were advocating what I would have to describe, I think, as violence to meet the serious injuries that have been done your people, with which I totally agree.
I don't call that violence. I don't in any way encourage black people to go out and initiate acts of aggression indiscriminately against whites. But I do believe that the black man in the United States and any human being, anywhere, is well within his right to do whatever is necessary, by any means necessary, to protect his life and property, especially in a country where the federal government itself has proven that it is either unable or unwilling to protect the lives and property of those human beings.
Just before Pierre takes it, you've got a pretty good fighter and the world's heavyweight champion lined up with you to help out. Yes, Pierre.
Well, Mr. X, I guess I call you that. Is that the proper appellation, yes. Mr. X? I'm wondering if you still believe, as I think you certainly did at the time you were allied to the black Muslim movement, in a segregated black nation in North America.
I don't believe in any form of segregation or any form of racism. I'm against any form of segregation and against racism.
Am I right in saying that the black Muslim movement, which you have left, did believe in that?
Well, Elijah Muhammad taught his followers that the only solution was a separate state for black people. And as long as I thought he genuinely believed that himself, I believed in him and believed in his solution. But when I began to doubt that he himself believed that that was feasible, and I saw no kind of action designed to bring it into existence or bring it about, then I turned in a different direction.
Are you still a Muslim yourself?
Oh, yes. I'm a Muslim. I believe in the religion of Islam, which believes in brotherhood, complete brotherhood of all people. But at the same time that I believe in this brotherhood, I don't believe in forcing my desire for brotherhood upon those who aren't willing to accept it.
Of course, I think the Christians would say that they also believed in brotherhood. What did you say to that?
I'd say they believe in it, but don't practice it.
Well, that'd be a pretty good answer.
Sir, when the muezzin goes up in the minaret twice a day, he cries to the world, there is but one God, and he is Allah. Do you deny that there is a Christian God?
The muezzin does this 5 times a day.
5 times, and I only heard him twice.
Well, you were fortunate to hear him twice. But he does this 5 times a day, and the same God that he says that he expresses the existence of is the God that the Christians profess to believe in themselves, and the God that the Jews believe in. One God, the creator of the universe. The Muslims believe in the God that created the universe, and I think the Christians do, and the Jews do. Now, as long as all of them are talking about the creator, the Jews may call him Jehovah, and Christians may have another name for him. Those who are Arabic-speaking refer to him as Allah. Well, we believe in the same God.
Now, as the Muslim religion advances in the United States, are you modernizing it or sticking with the old faiths? For example, the complete segregation of the sexes.
I think that everything today on this earth is being modernized. Religious principles and practices, as well as political and other things.
Now, when you went to Mecca, this is a very sacred and forbidden city. I tried to get to Mecca myself and certainly didn't make it, not being a Muslim. But how would they accept you as one? You're an American. There are few American Muslims.
This is true, and by being an American and not having not being able to speak the Arabic language, I did strike a snag, a very serious snag, but I was fortunate to have been pretty well known by the officials in Arabia, and they knew too that I had accepted Orthodox Islam. It had been highly publicized in the paper, and I became a guest of the state. I was a guest of Prince Faisal, the present King Faisal, and they made it possible for me to go before the committee, Hajj committee or Hajj court, who examines you and asks you questions about your belief, and if you pass it, then you are okay to go to Mecca. But
you would have to have a translator then.
I had one. Then realizing that our problem in America, that we are black Americans, and we have a problem that goes beyond religion, we formed a group known as the Organization of Afro-American Unity. And the objective of this organization, it's non-religious, number one. Any Negro can belong to it. And the objective of that organization is to bring about a condition that will guarantee respect and recognition of the 22 million black Americans as human beings. We feel that the problem, number one, of the black man in America is beyond America's ability to solve. It's a human problem, not an American problem or a Negro problem. And as a human problem or a world problem, we feel that it should be taken out of the jurisdiction of the United States government and the United States courts and taken into the United Nations in the same manner that the problems of the black man in South Africa, Angola, and other parts of the world, and even the way they're trying to bring the problems of the Jews in Russia into the United Nations because of violation of human rights. We believe that our problem is one not of violation of civil rights, but a violation of human rights. Not only are we denied the right to be a citizen in the United States, we're denied the right to be a human being.
Mr. X, may I thank you very much for coming on our program and perhaps clearing away some of the cobwebs of misconception that some of us might have had about your belief. And I think you're a very sincere man, and it takes a lot of courage to admit a former belief is wrong, and we congratulate you for that and the service you performed tonight in giving us your views. Thank you so much, Mr.
Thank you.